Welcome to this tutorial on how to add a Nosecone generator to Fusion 360. As you may know, Fusion 360 is one software for computer-aided design, or CAD. The Nosecone generator that we will be using is essentially an easy tool that can help us make Nosecone shapes on Fusion 360. All of the shapes that you can make with the Nosecone generator, you can also technically make using normal tools. However, it's much easier if you just use a generator, especially when it comes to Nosecone shapes that have complicated mathematical formulas or require some interesting equations. So as you can see right now, we're on davesrocketshop.com with this particular URL. If you haven't yet navigated to this website, you should do so. This is where we're going to find the download link for the Nosecone generator. Then below you can see a couple of links below. So here, the first one is the most important one. This is the download link for the Nosecone generator. Below that, you will see an installation guide. The reason that this video is being made is because the old installation guide is a little bit dated. As you can see, this add-on was first made in 2019. So understandably, not everything in the old Fusion 360 UI has remained the exact same. Below that, you'll see an example, which if you're interested, you can follow along with later on, and some other interesting links. So the first thing that we're going to do is just click on this link to add the Nosecone generator to our files. And you can just hit open, and you'll see that automatically the zip was created into a folder. If your laptop does not automatically convert a zip to a folder, you can usually just right click and hit extract zip. Then once we've made this folder, we're going to navigate to our Fusion 360. As you can see, I'm on the main homepage, on the My Fusion tab on the left. From here, you can click Create a Design. This will just start you off with an empty design. Right now, we won't be focusing on how to actually make the Nosecone. Instead of looking at this create a sketch and extrude and revolve, ignore these features for a moment and click on Utilities in the top. So above all of these various features, there's a tab labeled Utilities. You can go ahead and click on that. You'll see a lot of different features again. The ones that we're concerned with are add-ins. So you can see a little logo here with a gear icon and a developer console. So you can hit add-ins and a drop-down appears. Fusion App Store we can ignore again. Just hit scripts and add-ins. And if it requests for file access, this will probably be necessary, as it gives the app permission to access the file which you just downloaded. So once I've hit approved, you can click the plus icon here. So essentially what we're doing here is, in addition to all of these other add-ins, we're uploading an add-in from our computer. So once I've hit the plus, you can see script or add-in from device. And it's automatically in my folder. You'll remember that we created a zip, and from that zip we extracted a folder. You'll see a lot of different folders inside of the Nosecones folder, such as resources and various Python files. Those are essentially what give the add-on its functionality. You can just hit Nosecones here. Do not click on resources inside of that, and once you hit Nosecones, hit open, and that will upload the Nosecones add-on to your computer, or to your Fusion 360 rather. And you'll see that there's this little switch next to the word Nosecones, which you may have to scroll down to see the Nosecones add-in. You can just hit this little switch here. And now when you go back to solid at the top, you'll see all of the commands that we're used to using. And if you've used Fusion 360 before, you'll know that the first step to creating any object essentially is to click Create Sketch. Here we can really choose any plane, for example this one. And lastly, you'll see these tools here, which are used to make a sketch. You can hit Create, and you'll see the Nosecone generator at the bottom. So with that said, you can now see a lot of different ways of making a Nosecone. Essentially, what the Nosecone generator will do for us is make a 2D profile of our Nosecone. Or essentially, if you took a Nosecone and you chopped it in half vertically, you would see a certain profile, which if you then revolve around an axis will give you the full Nosecone. And that's what we're going to be working with today. Hopefully it becomes a little bit more clear as we go along. So there are a lot of different types of nosecones. I mentioned conical nosecones earlier, I think. This is essentially a straight line which is revolved around an axis, or if you've ever seen a traffic cone or something like that, it's that kind of shape. Elliptical is basically if you take an oval and rotate it, and then these three at the bottom are a little bit more complicated. So elliptical nosecones are pretty standard. Here we can just use any sort of random length. What the length is going to tell you is the distance between the tip of the cone, of the nose cone, and the base of the nose cone, which again we'll see in more detail later. And lastly, the radius. Of course, a nose cone has a circular base. The radius will tell us about the size of the circular base. So for example, we can do a 100 millimeter length with a 20 millimeter radius. Next you'll see solid. Solid effectively tells you like that you want to fill in the entire nose cone with material. While this is sometimes an option, it's definitely not recommended as it wastes a lot of filament and it takes up a lot more mass than is required. So you want to uncheck solid, and you can insert a thickness. The thickness is essentially how big the walls of the nose cone are. So for example, if we said 5 millimeters, or actually we can stick with 2 for this demonstration. And lastly, you'll see shoulder. If you've ever used OpenRocket before, you might remember that the shoulder is basically how a nose cone or a component is able to interface with a body tube. It's a slightly thinner part of the nose cone which connects directly into a body tube and slots in kind of to create a relatively strong friction fit. So we can click shoulder, and finally we see the length and the radius. Ideally, the radius of your shoulder should be just a little bit thinner than the radius of your nose cone. So here I can do, for example, 18, which is 2 millimeters less than the radius of my nose cone. For the length, it should be definitely smaller than your length of the entire nose cone. So, for example, 30 was actually fine here. And you'll see we don't see anything here yet. When I hit OK, we've suddenly generated the side profile of the nose cone. Now, if you imagine this from a side angle, from another angle, maybe you can kind of imagine how if this entire shape is rotated around the red line, it'll form into a nose cone. So now that we've created the sketch, right, we can hit finish sketch. And like I mentioned before, you can imagine how revolving it around a line might create a 3D figure. So I can hit revolve, and now we're going to choose which figure we want to revolve. So the profile will be this whole thing, which you can click on. Then the axis, I can choose green, and you'll see it rotates 360 degrees to form into a full nose cone. Now what we'll also need to worry about later on down the road is a fillet, which we can, or a chamfer, or a fillet, which we can worry about later. For now, you can see the basic principles of how a nose cone can be generated with the add-on and how the add-on can be installed. And if you hit OK, you can see our full nose cone. There's again a lot of other features that are available on the software, but hopefully this guide has been helpful in showing you how you can use Fusion 360 to make rocket parts, and specifically how it can be used to make a nose cone. Thank you.